Welcome to the Hidden Corners, where truth and terror collide. Discover a realm where the lines between the living and the supernatural blur, as you embark on a journey to the paranormal and visit the mysterious hidden corners of your mind.
Welcome to the Wolfman Chronicles. This is Chapter 12 of Book 7, which makes it Episode 89. And we're in Alaska, and it's Mother's Day. Jack stepped out of the small Alaskan airport, took a deep breath, the crisp, cold air filling his lungs. The familiar scent of pine, damp earth instantly washed away the desert dust from his senses. Rachel practically skipped ahead, her face lighting up as she spotted Miguel's white Suburban pulling into the lot. "We're home," Jack murmured, a hint of a smile on his face. He took a deep breath and let it sink in. Sasha laughed. "And we're safe on the ground. I'm beginning to feel that anything uneventful is worth taking note of." And Jack nodded at that. "I agree with you 100%. "Darn good to see you," Miguel said as he gave everyone a hug. "You look well," Jack replied. "You all healed up?" Miguel nodded at that. "Yeah, I'm still a little sore when I laugh or I cough, but yeah, I'm good." Now, during the drive home, Miguel filled Jack in on the ongoing investigation into the plane crash. They brought in all the remaining bodies that were left on the mountain. He quickly glanced at Rachel, making sure that she hadn't been disturbed by the conversation. But she was busy telling Rosa all about their wild Nevada adventures. "Jack, there's something out there that keeps messing with the wreckage site. You see, they claim someone is stealing objects, almost like it might be collecting trophies." Jack chuckled. He knew exactly who that someone was. The mysterious, big, hairy creature that had assisted in their rescue. But he wasn't about to tell anyone about that. The snow had almost melted from the driveway up to the big log house. It was spring in Alaska, and the days were just a bit longer and warmer. "Hola, welcome home," Rosa called out, barely waiting for the truck to stop before running out to meet the group, wiping her hands on her apron. Her warm embrace was like a comforting blanket, and she quickly wrapped both Sasha and Rachel in her arms. "I've got hot stew, fresh bread, and enough homemade churros to keep you fed for a week." Rachel grabbed a churro on her way through the kitchen, and Rosa swatted her hand playfully. "Stew first, churros later," she laughed. Rachel was already telling Grizzly and Rosa all her stories of the desert. The phone rang, and everyone jumped. "We have a phone now?" Jack and Sasha both asked, a surprised look on their faces. "Installed just after you left," Miguel replied. "It picks up a satellite signal and works pretty good. Your cell phone should work now, too." "Well, I'll be damned," Jack muttered as he picked up the phone, putting it on speaker. "Happy Mother's Day," two little voices sang out in unison. And in the background, Catherine's cheerful laughter filled the room. "Hi, everyone." "Cat," Jack exclaimed. "How are you all doing?" "Oh, we're great. The kids are talking up a storm, and the gallery was just featured in Colorado Magazine. They did a full spread. Photos, interviews, the works." "Well, Cat, that's fantastic," Jack said, a genuine smile breaking through. "Hi, Uncle Jack," two little voices chorused together. Jack's heart swelled. "Well, hello there, you two. I miss you so much." "Miss you too," one of them piped up, while the other giggled. "Usko's been wanting to take the kids to Siberia to visit his family, so we're planning a trip." "How was Nevada?" Well, for the next hour, everyone told their stories, even Rachel. It felt good to be home, good to be with family. As the night wore on, Grizzly leaned back in his chair, a toothpick dangling from his mouth and a glass of whiskey in his hand. "So, Everything back to normal, Jack? He muttered. Jack chuckled, a wry grin tugging at the corner of his mouth. Ah, Grizzly, you know me. I don't go looking for trouble. It just likes the way I smell. Nadia pressed her back against the cold, crumbling concrete of the alley, her breath coming in short, ragged bursts that misted in the frigid air. And somewhere far off, the glow of Sochi's winter lights shimmered, cheerful and warm, so different from the shadowed underbelly where she now hid. Her fingers trembled as she clutched the burner phone, trying to make her call go through. Busy. Again. She left a brief message. Call me. Urgent. The day had started with laughter and bright crystalline snow glittering beneath a pale spring sun. There was fresh powder at the Rosa Kutor ski resort, and Natia and Igor had arrived early, the mountain peaks rising like silent, snow-capped guardians against the blue sky. The air was crisp and clean, biting at their cheeks but filling their lungs with a freshness that felt like freedom. Nadia couldn't remember the last time she had laughed so much. Nadia, always the daredevil, had convinced Igor to take the Black Diamond run first thing in the morning. Come on, Igor, she had shouted. Live a little. How could she know those would be the last words she would ever say to him? They raced down the slope, the wind howling in their ears, the trees blurring past in streaks of white and green. Natia, always a few paces ahead, glanced back just in time to see him go down. She had laughed, expecting him to pick himself up, smile at her with that boyish grin of his, but he had stayed face down in the snow, and that's when she saw the snow turning a brilliant shade of red. Her scream was lost in the frigid mountain air. Who had pulled the trigger? Her mind raced with possibilities, none of which made any sense. But one thing she knew for certain. She was probably next. A sound, footsteps splashing through the slushy street, jolted her from her thoughts. Nadia's heart raced and she shrank further into the darkness, her pulse pounding in her ears. She watched as a figure walked by, a shadow in a heavy coat, hood pulled low against the oncoming rain. Her eyes stayed fixed on the alley's entrance, her muscles tensed to bolt, but the figure moved on. The phone vibrated. She nearly dropped it, but caught herself, fumbling to bring it to her ear. Mom, she whispered, struggling to keep the fear out of her voice. There was a brief, tense silence on the other end, a normal delay. Then Sasha's voice, warm but laced with quiet urgency, came through. Natia, what's wrong? Where are you? I'm in Sochi, but I can't stay on the phone long. Natia's voice broke and she fought to steady herself. Igor's dead. He was shot. I don't know who did it, but I think they're coming for me next. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end. Are you safe right now? Are you alone? Yes, I'm hiding in an alley near our hostel. My bike's parked outside. As soon as I'm sure it's safe, I'll move my things to another location. Sasha's voice tightened, all traces of softness gone. Listen to me. Don't go back to your room. Get to a crowded place, a cafe, a shopping mall, anywhere public. It's better to be seen in a crowd than to be cornered alone. Do you still have the emergency funds and the identification papers I set up for you? Yes, in my bag. Good. Use them. Change your appearance and stay hidden. A tear slipped down Natia's cheek. I know, Mom. I've been through this too many times before, but Mom, Igor, he's gone. I know, darling. Sasha's voice cracked, but she recovered. But I need you to focus. I can't lose you too. Just stay hidden, and I will come for you. No, Mom. No, it's too dangerous. I only called because I want you to know that I love you, and I wanted to tell you Happy Mother's Day. The line went dead. Natia pulled her hood tighter, blending with the darkness, her eyes full of tears. One thing was certain. Whoever had killed Igor was still out there, and probably was looking for her. And she was determined to find out who they were. "No!" Sasha yelled, collapsing to the floor. Jack ran to her side, putting his arms around her and helping her to the sofa. Everyone gathered around. "What's wrong, Sasha? What happened?" Sasha sat on the sofa, her face pale, her hands were trembling. Jack knelt beside her, his grip firm on her shoulders. "Sasha, look at me. Tell me exactly what she said." Sasha's voice wavered, but she forced herself to stay steady. "She's in Sochi. Igor's dead. Someone shot him. She doesn't know who. She said she thinks they're coming after her." Her voice broke. "Jack, she called just to tell me she loves me, to tell me Happy Mother's Day. And then the line went dead." Okay, we need to keep calm," Jack said, trying to maintain a sense of control, even as his heart raced. "Nadia's smart. She's street smart. And she's been through this before. She'll keep her head down. She knows how to protect herself." Sasha's eyes flared with desperation. "I have to go to her, Jack. I have to get her out of there." "Sasha, no." Jack's voice was firm, but not unkind. "It's too dangerous for you to go back to Russia, and you know that. They won't just target her, they'll come after you, too. You don't have asylum there like she does." "I don't care." Sasha tried to push herself to her feet, but Jack's strong hands kept her steady. "She's my daughter, Jack, my baby. I can't just stay here and do nothing." I know, but running back there without a plan is suicide." Jack caught a deep breath. "Listen to me. I'll go. I have a better chance of getting her out without drawing attention." Sasha shook her head, tears spilling over. "But Jack, what if they recognize you? You know what happened the last time you went to Russia." I won't be Jack Moore in Russia," Jack said, his voice low and calm. "No, not this time. I've got a new identity." Sasha met his gaze, her panic giving way to fragile resolve. "You really think you can get to her?" "I do, and I won't leave without her." Jack looked at Grizzly, who stood leaning against the doorframe with his arms crossed. "Grizz, I need you to keep an eye on things here and make sure nobody gets any ideas about running off to Russia after me." Grizzly's weathered face softened just a bit. "You just get that girl back. Miguel and I will make sure the ladies stay put." Jack smiled, but his eyes were sharp with determination. "I'll bring her back, I promise." He gave Sasha's shoulder a reassuring squeeze, then hurried to pack, his mind already racing through the possibilities, the dangers, and the unknowns of what awaited him in Sochi, and he hadn't even been home a day. Jack zipped his duffel bag shut with a decisive pull, his jaw clenched with a mix of focus and tension. The room was quiet, but the muffled sounds of Rose's soothing voice came from the living room where she was holding Sasha, trying to calm her. Sasha's sobs had quieted, but the grief and the worry were palpable, filling the air like a storm cloud. The door creaked, and Jack looked up to see Miguel stepping into the room. He walked over and he sat on the edge of the bed, watching Jack pack with a serious expression. "Would you like me to come with you?" Miguel asked, his voice steady but his eyes full of concern. Jack paused, his hand resting on the strap of the duffel. He reached over, placing a firm but gentle hand on Miguel's shoulder. "I do appreciate it, but I really think I need you here." Miguel's brow furrowed. "But you'll be alone, and I know Russia isn't exactly friendly territory." "I know," Jack interrupted, his tone firm but not unkind. "But Sasha's barely holding it together right now. I need you and Grizzly here to make sure she doesn't try to follow me. I wouldn't put it past her to grab her passport and catch the next flight. She's scared out of her mind, and we've got Rachel to think about now. I need you to help her through this rough time. She's tough and resilient, but she's still a kid. Seeing Sasha like this isn't going to do her any good. And her new school starts tomorrow. Miguel nodded, a determined look crossing his face. I won't let Sasha go off the deep end, Jack, and I'll keep a close eye on Rachel and drive her to school. You have my word. Jack's expression softened, a rare warmth in his eyes. I know you won't. I trust you, Miguel. You've always come through when it counts. Miguel nodded at that. Just make sure you come back, okay? Yeah, I plan to, Jack said, hefting the bag onto his shoulder. And with Natia in one piece. They stood in a moment of silence before Jack walked out, feeling the weight of Miguel's loyalty and Sasha's fear pressing on him. But that weight also gave him strength. He stepped into the living room where Rosa met his gaze with a worried but resolute nod. Sasha's tear-filled eyes locked on his, and she opened her mouth to speak. But Jack shook his head gently. I'll bring her home, Sasha. Promised. Without another word, he stepped out the door, the cold Alaskan night biting against his face as he headed for his truck. Jack leaned back against the cold, stiff airport seat, staring out the glass window at the bustling runway beyond. Jet engines roared and lights flashed against the night sky. His reflection stared back at him, tired eyes and a weathered face. He rubbed a hand over the stubble on his chin and chuckled dryly to himself. Here he was, another boarding pass in his hand, another flight path stretching out ahead of him like an endless line on a map. Ireland to Alaska, the plane crash. Alaska to Nevada. Nevada back to Alaska. And now Alaska to Russia. All in a matter of just a few months. His life had become a constant cycle of jet engines, cramped seats, and strangers who didn't even know a thing about the chaos swirling around in him. I'm becoming a damn frequent flyer, he muttered to himself, shaking his head. If I live through all this, they ought to name a wing after me. But there was no humor in his voice, just exhaustion. Not just from the miles traveled, but from the endless battles, the lives at stake, and now the face of a terrified girl on the other end of a phone line. And Jack was the one going straight into the storm. Again. The intercom crackled with the announcement for his flight to board. He stood, slinging his carry-on over his shoulder, feeling the weight settle in. But there was no hesitation. He'd made a promise. Jack's head jerked forward, the jolt of the plane's touchdown pulling him from a restless, dreamless sleep. He blinked, disoriented for a moment, his body protesting the awkward position he'd been twisted into for the past 19 hours in his direct flight. The rumble of the plane's engine slowed, and the overhead lights flickered, and the muffled voice of the flight attendant crackled over the intercom, in both Russian and English. Sochi, he was here. But now what? Jack leaned back, rubbing his tired eyes, and tried to clear the fog in his mind. His phone was already in his hand before he'd even realized it, thumb hovering over the number. Nadia's burner phone, the only link he had to her. He pressed the call button, listening to the endless ringing. Nothing. Not even a voicemail. Jack clenched his jaw, shoving the phone back into his pocket. It was like trying to find a needle in a haystack with shifting shadows and cold winds, and more threats than he could count. He shuffled off the plane with the other passengers, feeling a chill run through him as the airport's drafty terminal welcomed him with a sterile, indifferent embrace. He was a stranger in a strange land. No allies, no solid plan, just a desperate promise that he'd made to Sasha. Jack's eyes scanned the crowded terminal, the faces blurring together, tourists in ski gear, locals bundled against the cold, and always a few shadowy figures lingering near the exits. Jack's pulse quickened as he slipped into the men's restroom, locking himself in a stall. He pulled out his phone again and opened the secure messaging app Sasha had shown him. No new messages. No updates. Well, he had to start somewhere. First, he needed a base. Somewhere to set up, to gather his thoughts. He couldn't just wander the city aimlessly. His own reflection stared back at him in the scratched metal of the stall door. A tired, stubbled face with storm-gray eyes that seemed both weary and fierce. "All right, Jack," he muttered to himself. "Let the hunt begin." With a deep breath, he stepped out of the stall, squared his shoulders, and walked into the chaos of Sochi's bustling airport, a lone wolf in enemy territory. The crowded Sochi streets were a world of noise and motion. Tourists with their colorful ski jackets, vendors hawking steaming cups of mulled wine, and locals bustling about their business. And in the shadowed underworld, organized crime syndicates operated around the clock. Sochi is about as far south as one can get in Russia. The city lies on the eastern side of the Black Sea, in the shadow of the Caucasus Mountains, and sprawls along the coast, the Key West of Russia, a place of warm water and palm trees in the summer, and world-class ski resorts in the winter. It was the home of the 2014 Olympic Winter Games and hosted the Formula One Russian Grand Prix from 2014 and all the way through 2021. Russia's most powerful crime bosses have traditionally hailed from this very region, the northern Caucasus. Ded Kazan, long the acknowledged head of Russian organized crime, tracing his criminal origins to the Soviet Union of the 60s. With the help of political and police connections, the Kazan organization facilitated the Afghan heroin trade, laundered money abroad, and traded in stolen goods. Eliminating rivals is necessary. Kazan oversaw his network, part of an international organized crime presence that numbered over 300,000 soldiers. In 2014, just before the Winter Olympics were to be held in Sochi, a sniper's bullet hit him in the neck and in the back as he was leaving one of his 2 restaurant headquarters. He was dead within minutes. With Kazan out of the way, control of Sochi loosened and a host of criminal networks worked their way into the city. Now, Viktor Kamarov was the name everyone had come to know and fear. Nadia's hands trembled as she pulled on her jacket, but not from the cold. Her mother's voice still echoed in her ears. Sasha's desperate plea to stay hidden, to wait for her, to be safe, but Nadia couldn't just hide. Not after what they'd done to her boyfriend. Igar, who had laughed with her that morning on the ski slopes, his cheeks flushed with joy, his dark eyes bright with life. Igor, whose smile had been wiped away by a single crack of a sniper's rifle, his blood staining the pure white snow. She had planned to tell him that day. She'd kept it a secret. Wanted to tell them on Mother's Day. Igor, I'm pregnant. A tear slipped down her cheek, but she wiped it away fiercely. Tears were for later. Revenge was for now. Nadia slipped out onto the street, her hood pulled low over her face. She knew where to begin. The nightclub district, the underground poker dens, the smoke-filled rooms where men whispered secrets and traded favors. She would find Viktor Kamarov, trick him or force him into telling her who had ordered the hit. She moved quickly, weaving through the crowded streets. Her very first stop was a second-hand clothing stall tucked between a bakery and a souvenir shop. She traded her ski jacket for a worn leather coat that hung loose on her frame, and a black beanie to hide her hair. Her scarf stayed wrapped around her lower face, the anonymity making her feel just a little bit safer. Next, she found a tiny, cluttered shop that smelled of tobacco and leather. It was an army surplus store. The grizzled old shopkeeper barely glanced up as she browsed. Her fingers brushed against a sturdy folding knife. It was sharp, the blade polished to a mirror finish, but it locked securely open, and the grip felt good in her hand. Perfect. She paid in cash, tucking the knife into her coat pocket before heading back out onto the street. The wind had picked up, sending flurries of snow swirling through the air. Night was falling, and with it came the neon glow of Sochi's underworld. Loud music thumped from nearby clubs, and the flashing lights cast ghostly colors on the falling snow. This was where the dark gangs operated, hidden in the chaos and dealing in the shadows. Nadia slipped into the first club, her eyes adjusting to the strobe lights and the smoky air. The place was packed. Tourists dancing, locals nursing drinks at the bar, and men in dark suits lingering in shadowed corners, watching and waiting. She made her way to the bar, leaned against it, and caught the bartender's eye. "I'm looking for someone who knows the city," she whispered, keeping her voice low. "Someone who deals in information." The bartender's face remained neutral, but his eyes flicked over her, sizing her up. "A lot of people know a lot of things here. What's it worth to you?" Nadia slid a few folded bills across the counter, enough to get his attention. "I'm looking for Viktor Komarov." The bartender's expression barely changed, but his eyes hardened slightly. "That's a dangerous name to ask for, little girl. You got a reason to find him?" She forced herself to smile beneath the scarf. "He's my uncle." The bartender looked at her suspiciously, gave a slight nod, tucked the bills into his pocket. "Try the back room of the Paradiso, but if you're smart, you're going to rethink this. Not many who go looking for Komarov come back the same." Nadia's pulse quickened, but she kept her expression steady. "I don't plan to come back the same." She slipped away from the bar, pushing through the crowd. The Paradiso was a few blocks away. It was a seedy-looking club with flickering neon lights and a line of sleek black cars parked outside. The bouncers at the door gave her a quick once-over, but she slipped through with a cluster of partygoers, melting right into the crowd. Music was louder here. It was a deep, bass-heavy thrum that vibrated in her bones. Colored lights swept across the dance floor, and overhead, a massive chandelier cast ghostly patterns across the room. She edged her way around the dance floor, her eyes on the shadowed door near the back, the VIP section. Two men guarded it, burly and expressionless. She needed a way past them. Her fingers tightened around the handle of the knife in her pocket. "Not yet," she told herself. "That's a last resort." As she looked around, she noticed a server's entrance just to the left of the bar. A staff-only door, barely visible behind a thick curtain. Perfect. Nadia slid toward it, following a waitress who was balancing a tray of drinks. Timing it just right, she slipped in behind the server, holding her breath. Now, the narrow hallway smelled of spilled alcohol and cigarette smoke. A few bored staff members stood chatting, barely glancing her way. She moved fast, slipping down the hallway, searching for another way to the back room. A flight of stairs led down, and she followed them, her heart pounding in her chest. The basement was a maze of storage rooms, crates of liquor, and a thick metal door at the far end. Light seeped through the crack beneath it. And steeling herself, Nadia pushed the door open a fraction and peered through. Viktor Komarov was there. A thick-set man with a shaved head, seated at a table covered in scattered cards and half-empty glasses. He laughed at something a thin, nervous man beside him had said, his voice a deep, rumbling growl. Nadia's grip tightened on the knife. She didn't have a plan. She didn't have a backup. But she had rage. And she needed information. The kind that only Viktor Komarov would have.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode, and I hope you'll join us next week for more of the Wolfman Chronicles. And until then, have a great week, everyone. And from Clay and I, we wish you all a happy Mother's Day.